Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Stateside Footy. Before we get into today's video, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button, but also make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of Stateside Footy's upcoming content. What's going on, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Stateside Footy. Well, another window has come and gone, and the U.S. men's national team had mixed results this window. Not exactly what Mauricio Pochettino necessarily had in mind, but it wasn't all terrible. I understand last night did not go as well as USMNT fans hoped it would against a rival in Mexico down in Guadalajara. But that being said, there were some positives to this window, and of course we're going to get into that and a whole bunch more. We're going to be talking about the first game in this window against Panama. We'll get into a little bit about Mexico. And we're going to also talk about some of these players because I think there needs to be a lot of context when we talk about this window in totality. I know a lot of other content creators are going to be, dropping their player ratings. I'm not necessarily going to do that because I don't necessarily think that it's applicable to this window, considering, this was Pochettino's first window. We had guys leaving after the first match, so we didn't have our full squad. So in that context, I just don't think it's, warranted for player ratings because yesterday, I don't think you can give anybody over a 5 for their performances yesterday. As a matter of fact, a lot of those guys are probably sitting between 2 and 3. But I digress. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today, and of course, if you're on USMNT Twitter, you see it constantly, the bombardment of certain players and whether or not they fit into the U.S. men's national team, into the full senior team, and I felt obliged to comment on that. But we're going to begin with the first leg of this 2-leg window against Panama because I actually thought that was a very good performance. Now, albeit I wasn't necessarily thrilled, Pochettino was giving playing time to guys who otherwise probably wouldn't be. I understand that, there's a lack of depth at the goalkeeper position, but I still would have rather seen Patrick Schulte start ahead of Matt Turner. But of course, we've been banging that drum for a while now. But, maybe something changes in November. Who knows? But outside of that, I was actually very happy to see that first starting 11 come out. You had the double pivot there with Aiden Morris and Gianluca Busio, which I thought both played very well in that Panama match. I liked the interchanging between Musa, Aronson, and Pulisic. And eventually what ended up transpiring was that they had Musa out there flanked on the right. And I thought he actually held his own. I like the interchanging passes between Aronson and Pulisic, especially when Musa ended up making that run down the middle, and that give and go between Anthony Robinson, Pulisic, Aronson, and then back to Pulisic, and then of course the crossover and hits Musa. I thought that was a well-designed play, and I actually appreciated the creativity in the way that the U.S. men's national team were getting forward in that match. And now, some fans will take a step back and say, well, it's Panama. But, it's not just Panama. It was, a team that was very much playing with confidence, which is something we hadn't seen. They look competitive. They look scrappy. They had a feel of a team that wanted to get out there and prove to their new coach that they were worthy of wearing the badge. And so from that aspect, I was actually quite pleased. And that's a stark contrast of what we saw the last time we saw him in September, and of course dating back to the Copa America. So on one hand, you had to appreciate what they gave us versus Panama. On the other side of the coin, we have last night's performance against Mexico, which was listless. I'm trying to be nice. I don't want to necessarily talk shit. But that was a terrible performance all the way around. Now, when I take a step back and we talk about context, we have to talk about the fact that the U.S. men's national team were without, a bulk of their starting 11. Chris Richards is out. Serginho Dest is out. Tyler Adams is out. Weston McKennie is out. Gio Reyna is out. Timmy Weah is out. Flo Balogun is out. And so it doesn't leave Mauricio Pochettino with a lot of options. So from that context, he's playing with, essentially the second team, which is fine. I mean, when you look at where these guys are playing for their club, they're playing their club football. They're playing in some of the best competitive leagues in Europe, and so from that context, this necessarily shouldn't be a problem. But yesterday we saw a few things that definitely need to be talked about. The first thing is that Mexico played the way a rival should play in a rivalry match. They came out with all the enthusiasm. They came out with the swagger. They came out with all the confidence. And that was on full display. The other thing that I think was very evident was the mindset of what this match was. And this is where I get deep into my feels, because it's a rivalry match. It doesn't matter that if it's Nations League, Gold Cup, World Cup qualifier, whatever the case may be, it is a match in Mexico, in a place where we have only won once. It's not a hostile territory. It is a hostile territory. But that being said, it's also, there should be a want to go down there and punk Mexico on their home soil. I get it. From a Mexico standpoint, this is the way that they've always performed. Never allowing the U.S. to come onto their own turf and come away with the result. Understood. But from a U.S. perspective, you should have that want. And that just was not there last night. It really wasn't. The other thing that I noticed, and here's the weird thing, that they didn't react well. The U.S. men's national team did not react well to them not getting the whistle. And when Mexico started to get physical, the U.S. men's national team backed away. And that was the more surprising aspect of last night's match. Yeah, they were not, the double pivot of Busio and Morris was not good. As a matter of fact, every single time that the ball came into the middle of the park, Mexico crashed on it, making it very difficult to get the ball forward. Okay, I understand. But just matching physicality with physicality, that aspect was not there. And it got me thinking, well, what was the reason why they didn't step up to the plate to at least match that energy with Mexico? And, really what it comes down to is look at where they're playing their club football. Look at what they get in Europe. Whether it's the Premier League, the Championship, the Eredivisie, Bundesliga, Serie A, La Liga, whatever the case may be, those refs in Europe are quick to the whistle. Always quick to the whistle. Never allowing players to stand out, never allowing players just to play the game. Usually the refs like to keep that aggression in check. And some might think it's good, some might think it's bad. Now, whether that is hypersensitive, whether these refs are hypersensitive to contact, or if it's psychological pressure, whatever the case may be, those refs are quick. And so if you're a player and there's minimal contact, you're going to get that whistle. Last night, that was not the case. As a matter of fact, that ref last night swallowed his whistle on numerous occasions. There were a few different occasions where I thought there should have been free kicks, an opportunity for the U.S. men's national team to reset, take that deep breath and keep pushing forward. That did not happen. As a matter of fact, there were numerous times where guys were on the ground, kind of looking back at the ref, putting their hands up like, hey, what's going on? And they just weren't getting those calls. And Mexico, played off that and used it to their advantage. And the U.S. did absolutely nothing about it. And so for me, the mindset was 100% telling that they just did not know how to adjust to it. And that's, and I don't necessarily know if that is because a lot of these guys, some of these guys are getting first time call-ups, so they're not used to that environment. And of course, some of these other guys that have been around, haven't played in Mexico. They played Mexico in the States, but they haven't played them down in Mexico, so they're not they're not used to that environment. And to me, that was the most telling thing about that, not being able to adjust. And you wonder if that is because a lot of these guys get pampered in Europe, or whether that was a coaching issue. Having a guy like Mauricio Pochettino tell you straight up, like, this is CONCACAF, this isn't Europe, so it's going to this thing is going to be reffed a little bit differently. Or maybe Pochettino is also using this as his first experience as well too. And to me, that was again, that was the most telling aspect of last night's game. But so on one hand, we have one good and then we have one bad. I don't get emotionally attached to it, right? Like, if you go onto USMNT social media and you kind of get that sky is falling attitude, and it's like, pump the brakes, man, because you're looking at this from an emotional state, not necessarily using the proper context. If we had our full starting 11, it probably plays a little bit different, but we didn't, and it was what it was. All right, so let's get into it. And the biggest problem that I have seen from USMNT fans is I wouldn't use the word hate. I don't necessarily think it's an issue of hate, but a lot of people think that the reality is guys like Josh Sargent, guys like Brendan Aronson, maybe Aiden Morris, Gianluca Busio, Yunus Musa to an extent, don't belong as starters on the USMNT. And in some contexts, with some people, they just don't think they should even be rotational players, and I firmly disagree. Because when we are at full strength, these guys are going to be coming off the bench. Mauricio Pochettino is going to use these guys to his advantage, whether it be Ricardo Pepi, whether it be Josh Sargent, Brendan Aronson. There are going to be games, and there are going to be moments where you're going to need energy guys. And when these guys, when you're starting one or two of these guys around better players, obviously they look and they'll play better. But what we saw last night when Mexico was utilizing their press, it was a collective. It was a collective, like, deer in the headlights moment. I don't think that these are bad players. I think they're actually very productive players, and we know that because we see it on a week in and week out basis. But what one of the biggest things that we have seen over the course of the last 6 months is, especially after Copa America, we just, we don't have a full squad. And so we're pressed into, playing a lot of these guys together. And it's also for them, new coach, new system. And some of these guys are playing together for the first time. So there's not going to be a lot of, cohesion. That also plays into it as well, too, because you don't have each other's timing down. You don't know where players like to be in position to get balls delivered. And so I think a lot of that played into that match last night. And so, when I look at yesterday's loss in totality, it's like, okay, I get it. I understand. But, specifically Josh, he had a nice opportunity in the first half, late in the first half against Panama, and he set one over the crossbar. Did that look good? Obviously not. But when I look at both games in totality, he didn't get a lot of service to begin with. And outside of and then the thing that I look for is if you're not getting getting service, what are some of the other things that you can do to be proactive, right? So what are you doing to get the ball back up the field on a high press? Are you engaging? And I thought at times Josh did that, and then there was other times where I didn't think that he did it well at all. And I mean, everybody knows that I'm a Josh guy, so I'm trying to be, I'm trying to do this without, having my sergeant bias come out. But the reality was there were times where he did, and then and last night, it wasn't at all. Do I think that means that Josh should never be called into the national? Of course not. Of course not, because there are going to be games and there's going to be moments where that opponent suits his style of play. And I still believe that Josh is the way that he plays and the way that he plays every single week for Norwich suits what Mauricio Pochettino is looking at 9. Obviously, when Ballo gets back, we're going to see that a lot. And, whether it's fair to a guy like Josh, well, it is what it is, right? The only thing he can do is continue to be productive with Norwich. That is the only thing that he can do. He can control him, but when it comes to the context of the national team, that's going to help him move forward. And when I look at these two games, do I think that Josh did himself a disservice? Yes and no. But I think overall, when you're not getting service, it's really hard to make those type of snap decisions like that. With Brendan, I actually thought his first game against Panama was obviously better than the Mexico performance. And I thought that the way that they were attacking down the left with Anthony Robinson going high, and that those interchanging touch passes between Pulisic and Aronson, and that touch that he put on to get Pulisic moving forward so he can make that cross into Musa. I thought that was beautiful. You have the space and you have the touch, and it was a good weighted ball through, man. I just thought it was great. I was really happy that Yunus Musa was able to get on the scoreboard. Same thing with Ricardo Pepi. It's these are the small things that you want to see moving forward to let your coach know that you can be trusted and you can be accounted on. And then we get to yesterday, where defensively you spent most of the match just running around, trying to get yourself in good positions to get the ball back high. But Mexico was too fast. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that some of those guys played a very big role in the Panama game with their workload overseas. I just think that they came into that Mexico match and I thought they were gassed. They really looked sluggish to me a little bit, but it's no excuse. They just didn't play well. But when you come in tired and you spend the majority of the first half running around trying to get yourself in position where you can win that ball back and you're unable to do it. And then when you look at what was happening offensively, they were just basically putting balls up top, hoping somebody was going to run something down. Their interlinking passes between the midfield were just snuffed out every single time. And now that's the thing. It's like, was it Mexico or was it the U.S. men's national team not being able to find that outlet pass to keep possession? it easily could have been both. So, and again, I think I mentioned it earlier that there's a few things that played into that one. When things aren't going your way and you're, basically being dominated on the ball, and you're hoping that maybe, the ref might save you with the whistle and you're not getting it, it only exacerbates things. But, I also think that some of these guys are playing together for the first time. And so there's obviously nuance between players. And that only happens, in training, like continuously working together. And that inexperience was very well seen on the pitch yesterday. So when I think about this window, I'll grade this window accurately. I think this was a C. If we're doing letter grades, I'll say it was a C, because on the one hand, you actually had a good performance. You had a good performance against Panama. You kept a clean sheet. I think in spaces you did they did very well against Panama, and they rectified the performance at Copa America. So from that aspect, I was very pleased. But then you have the performance against Mexico, which can't go unnoticed. You have to hold yourself accountable for that performance. And what can I say, man? It was a bad way to close out the window. But, there's no excuses, man. I look at this and I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. I liked that Pochettino was doing his best to try to get that win in Mexico. A lot of people thought there should have been rotation coming into the Mexico game, but he generally kept the starting 11 for the most part intact. And a lot of that has to do with understanding who he's playing, where he's playing, and who gives you the best opportunity to try to get a win. So from that context, I understood it. I definitely think that this was a learning experience for Pochettino, and understanding that, you're going to have to use especially with these friendlies, the best thing to do is use use a healthy rotation. Bring in, it's not just the European guys, but also the domestic guys as well too. That may have that may have been playing a lighter workload being in Major League Soccer. This is, if anything, that loss was a learning experience for everyone around. But overall, I give it a C. I can't I'm not gonna get carried away with yesterday's result. From the context that we didn't have our starting 11, when you think about the guys that went back to their clubs after the Panama game, and you understand that Mexico has never been a place where we've really been successful. So you add all three of those together, it's understandable that these things will happen. The better news is that we have a window in November, and from that standpoint, we're going to get some guys back. It looks like Tyler Adams and Timmy Weah will be joining their clubs in training, and they'll be back shortly. So, knock on wood, we'll have those two guys back. But one of the things that you can take from this is that learning process. And, it's interesting, right? Because, Pochettino, most of his experience is obviously over in Europe. And so this is his first foray into CONCACAF. So now he's seen it, and he doesn't strike me as somebody that's stupid. And I would probably assume that he takes this and learns from it and adjusts. And now I also think it's time for him, from this point to November, literally look at your entire pool. Because we have, if you're talking the two guys there in the second Bundesliga, Brooks and Green, guys in Major League Soccer, whether it's Morris Roldan, whoever, this is your opportunity now to see the entire pool. And if that means that you have to go to some games, check it out, then do it, man. Do I still think that, Aronson has a spot? I do. A spot coming off the bench. Yep. I believe Sargent has an opportunity, 100%. Yeah. But next window, we'll get Chris Richards back. We'll get Weah and Adams back. So that's going to do is help. But again, as I close this thing out, I understand the frustration of having to deal with the loss against Mexico, and tip your hat to Andres Guardado, and then also Raul Jimenez. He played well last night. You do have to tip your cap a little bit, but these are going to be the lessons that we're going to learn. Now, does that mean that our bench is terrible? Our second team is terrible? No. It just means that they're going to have to adjust, and they're going to have to learn how to feel each other out. Especially if they haven't played a lot together or haven't trained a lot together. But these are the things that you learn. These are the growing pains as we're ascending to 2026. So I'm looking forward to the next window, and that's pretty much all I'm going to have to, that's pretty much what I'm going to speak on this window. I would have preferred the Dos de Cero in the other direction, but unfortunately that's soccer. So stay tuned to Stateside Footy, because we do have some more content coming up on the horizon. We have a decision day live stream that's going to be coming up. So definitely check that out. Until next time, thanks guys.